But they did okay in Tacoma, but it was muddy. So off they come over to here. And what do they get? They get the wind. They don't even get the big top up. And so they had a very disappointing performance. And typically when the circus comes to town, several days ahead of time, you get the poster men coming through, putting posters all over the town proclaiming the fire. In Tacoma, 40 advanced men came to town. 40 for the circus. Now, I don't know if you got 40 advanced people to Ellensburg, but you got some advanced people coming in. Again, I don't think there's any surviving posters, but or billboards, but you think about billboards with handbills. You think there would be, but we don't have any of those either. At any rate, we had the circus in town. It was disappointing, and they had their own train. And the funny thing is, in the fire history now, so the fire starts at 10:30 and burns till 3 in the morning. There's not one word of the circus at that time. I can tell you that those circuses had their own firefighting force. And you would think that if they were anywhere near, they would have come helped. But there's no word of the circus coming and helping. Now, in Tacoma, they never pulled out of town until 2 in the morning after the last show. But here, apparently, they're gone by 10:30. So to me, that's an open thing I'm still researching, is what happened to the circus. And I will say right now, you know, in terms of, you know, somebody started the fire. Circus. Well, one thing is, they had a lot of, they were known to have criminals with them. The circus had been in North Yakima right before they came to Ellensburg. And the North Yakima paper said, the Herald said, wow, great job, Yakima police. We had total control over the pickpockets and whatnot that come with the circus. So, I mean, they're right there. Everybody knows it. You know, you got to go to the circus, watch your wallet. You know, everybody knows that. So you had those kind of people in town with the circus. And you had people who were used to putting signs over towns. So I'll throw that on the interesting side. I mean, if someone's actually going to put signs around, and by the way, putting signs around after a fire is really unusual. The last time we've seen it in America is locally in the Earth Liberation Front recently. If you follow that case, we have the people that are burning some genetic type lab buildings, and the lady was on trial last year in Seattle, and son of a gun, some houses burned up in Everett, and they put a big poster up, you know, compliments of the ELF, right when she's going to get sentenced. Now, I know it's a different topic, but I think that was a red herring. No, your buddies aren't going to do that right before you get sentenced. They're not going to do that. I think it was a different reason. But my point is, it's rare to be putting signs up about your fire. But these guys had, you know, they're used to putting signs up. I'm not saying they did it. I'm just saying that's one thing they did, was put signs up. Another thing they did was they knew how to fight fires. And they were gone. It was kind of a mystery to me. Did some of them stay behind? You know, you hire a lot of, come and go ones with the circus. And the town was full of vagrants and bums and strangers. That's true too. So I always wonder about, it's not the circus, but maybe somebody associated with the circus. I can't eliminate them. I need to research further. Yeah, maybe they got, you know, didn't make any money. And maybe the guys did, you know, the paychecks were crummy town after town. I don't know. Here's what was the brand new, the Yakima in North Yakima. And this had its opening July 1st. And on July 4th, the people on the decks could see Ellensburg's fire from downtown, right in the heart of downtown Yakima. Yeah. Well, let me back up a little bit. You know, because let's talk politics. Who would be so mad at Ellensburg? Who would want to hurt the community like that and intimidate the community? I mean, that's really intimidation. We wanted to be the capital. We know Olympia was the capital from the start, and they were going to hold on to it. At that time, there was 3 main candidates to be the capital for the state versus territory. Olympia wanted to keep it, Ellensburg and North Yakima wanted it. And each had their reasons. And for the Yakima and Ellensburg, location, of course, is a big player, with more central and whatnot. And we could go round and round on that. My personal opinion is Ellensburg was clearly the most central, because you had the railroad line right over the mountains, and to me it seems pretty obvious, that part of it. But Yakima was a player. And see, some people might say, well, North Yakima was so mean that they would burn their buddies, Ellensburg, or not their buddies, but their neighbor town, Ellensburg. So they'd be the capital. But it doesn't hold much water. A year before that, in 1888, at the territorial session, a committee had voted, hey, let's move the capital now to Yakima, North Yakima. And it missed by one vote. North Yakima missed by one vote in a committee. Now, maybe things wouldn't have worked out at the next committee, but at that point, they were almost the capital. And Ellensburg's own Austin Myers voted to go ahead and move it to North Yakima. So there's one example of not so much animosity. Another example is that in who's going to be the seat, the county seat, is always of interest. People want to have the county seat because jobs come with it and prestige. And I can give you many, many examples of violence involving who's got the county seat. Cheney and Spokane went at it a few years before that. Cheney called it the great, I forget the name, the great takeaway, the great robbery. Cheney went over to Spokane with wagons and rifles, and they took the records, and they went back to Cheney with them. By God, we're going to be the county seat. Eventually, Spokane got it back through growth, but there was violence, or at least armed. We will have violence, and there's many other examples. At a state level, the capital battle in Oregon is a good example. Some years prior to this, without going too much detail, Salem, Eugene, Corvallis were going at it, and Salem had built most of the Capitol building, anticipating that they're going to get the Capitol. It burned. Called it an arson, blamed Corvallis. Things went around and round. Salem wound up being the Capitol, although not actually by popular vote, so it's a different story. But we do have examples of potential violence in terms of state capitals. Yakima, when Kittitas County broke off from Yakima County, it wasn't a real negative because, well, it wasn't actually North Yakima at that time, it was Yakima City, which is now Union Gap, but the point is, Yakima retained its county seat when Kittitas County was formed, so that they did not lose a county seat. I don't see the animosity, the deep animosity. Also, think in your own life, you're desperately want to take action to defend what you have. The state capital, or the capital, Olympia had been the capital since 1853. They didn't want to lose it, they had it. Yakima and Ellensburg didn't have it. We wanted to have it, but it's not like we were desperately hanging on. I don't know that you can make a real strong case that Yakima would rise to such negative levels. But now, let's talk about Olympia. This is just just to get us in the mood for politics. First, Legislative Assembly, the Senate at Olympia. And my wife, Susie, here has always been the only one that ever pointed this out. Anybody see anything wrong with this? It's great. This hangs at the State Archives in Olympia. And I haven't gone back in, but I got to go back in because I like the people. I got to go tell them. They must know. They must know. But some artists obviously got their perspective nice, but didn't quite. Anyway, Washington. This is official record. And I think here's E.T. right here. Here's our guy, E.T. Wilson, right here. But Olympia, 1853, no problem. We're on the end of the Sound. We're close to Portland and Vancouver. Good for Governor Stevens to put a capital there. But by 1889, Olympia was a backwater. The railroad, to this day, if you ever ride the railroad past Olympia, guess what? The train to this day does not go into Olympia. You get off 7 miles out of town. To this day, when the railroad came through in the 80s, they bypassed Olympia on purpose. Olympia was down at the bottom of the Sound. 1889, Tacoma had the world's biggest wheat warehouse, railroad, Seattle was booming, the Oriental trade was going crazy, not from Olympia. They had, and I quote, a harbor that was fine half the time. This has to do with the mud and the tides in coming and going. Their industry was at a standstill. They had one thing going, and that was they were the capital. And I won't say that right now. Someone might, I won't. But they had, you know, it's nice there and all that. But what used to be critical location had bypassed them. It was no longer critical. And they would even admit it in their own newspapers that they had become stuck and the investments weren't going well. Other towns were booming. I mean, you're buying and selling a commercial lot 3 times in one day in some towns, making profits 3 times in one day. That's boom. Everybody, you know, it was 89 and Washington was booming. Not so much Olympia. They were hanging on. They were bypassed. I'm not saying, anyway, it's just an issue because they had something to lose. Who has something to lose in this fight? They did. So it's hard to eliminate Olympia versus Yakima because I think Olympia may have been more nervous, and the historical record clearly shows that they were pretty concerned. And well, there's that. We started this off looking at here's the building we're standing in right now. And right across the street, our first picture of the day, when we showed downtown Ellensburg before the fire, we showed Fogarty's store right here. And Bennett's was here, and all burned out. And that's Fogarty's tent right there. And he was lucky because at the time of the fire, he had he was a groceryman. He had 2 rail cars of groceries already coming this way before the fire, so when the fire hit, he actually had something to sell right away. And he temporarily ran that while he rebuilt 2 different buildings which exist. To this day, there's 2 buildings I think were united into a theater. I'm not real perfect on mine, but 2 of those across the street, 1 building is actually 2, and they were built by him. He accompanied E.T. Wilson on that train trip to Tacoma. He was not quoted, but he was one of the guys of the trip. You can see some of the buildings that weren't affected by the fire back in there. And a little further down there, you can't see them, and they're probably burned out from the fire, but another group that was blamed was the Chinese. And as a matter of fact, the Chinese were only tolerated. We know that. They were driven out of a lot of towns. Our town, Tacoma, is the most infamous of all. But Ellensburg tolerated, there were about 3,000 Chinese in the territory at that time. And after the Seattle fire and the Tacoma dispersion, 4 towns had the most. Seattle, Port Townsend, Spokane, and Walla Walla had significant Chinese communities. Ellensburg had a few, and they were along 2nd over this way, and then behind me over this way were a series of Chinese wash houses and restaurants. So they lived over in this area. Of course, we're going to blame another minority. The Chinese did it. And a matter of fact, now the sheriff was out of town bringing some murderers back here, but the undersheriff, they authorized to go raid the Chinatown, and they found 20 pair of trousers somebody had lifted. So we're going to, now the next cause, one of the newspapers says, let's get them out, send them to Portland. But that never happened. The town calmed down, and that did not take place. The Chinese experience is so much like the natives, though. When you say, well, are they the kind of group that would burn the town and throw notes around? Well, they were so much more the victim than they were the aggressors. There are just a few of them in terms of the main population. As a matter of fact, what I can dig up on local Chinese history and violence was that in 1887, after Bennett got his Stampede Pass tunnel dug, there was some layoffs. Some idle Chinese workers were hired to go up somewhere near China Camp, I'm going to say outside of, way up past Ronald somewhere, and do some placer mining. They were set upon, and all 27 were murdered except for 1. And that one, I only have one source for this, was Charlie Sam. And he came to Ellensburg and helped found the